Okay, in theory, we're live. I'm going to wait until it comes through and kind of just keep introducing myself. The senators snuck in today. The House, I didn't think really went into session today. I thought maybe the Senate was the same way. The schedule didn't look like it was too packed. But these guys, they're very sneaky. They snuck in and started doing their jobs. So let's go ahead and see what they're up to. And here we go.
By appointing the Honorable Raphael G. Warnock, a senator from the state of Georgia, to perform the duties of the chair.
And we're going to speed up and slow down
Under the previous order,
as
the
we
leadership time
need
is
to.
reserved. Morning business is closed. Under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration
And this is a
of
slight
the motion
delay.
to proceed to H.R.
Those are my children
3935,
upstairs.
which the clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar number 211, H.R. 3935, an act to amend Title 49 United States Code,
Let's find out
and
what this
so
all
forth and
is.
for other purposes.
HR 3945. I love how they make everything obscure. They don't do it on purpose. Trust me. They're good people. Let's get to the juice of it all, right? Because that's what we're here for. Oh, well, this is live, and it looks like whatever they're voting on. Motion to table the Schumer amendment with respect to the House message to accompany H.R. 815, the Supplemental Appropriations Act. But let's go back, Tarantino it a little bit, as they say. And let's see what this is all.
Reimbursed.
McConnell's a good place to start. Schumer,
objection.
we can give him some
I
air.
move to refer H.R. 15 to the Committee on Appropriations with instructions to report back forthwith with an amendment.
The clerk will report.
The senator from New York, Mr. Schumer, moves to
And we're
refer
going to speed it up. Because
the
it's
House
my
message to
screen and I
accompany
do
H.R.
it out well.
815
And
to
they're
the Committee on
really
Appropriations
slow
with instructions
talkers,
to
some of
report
them.
back forthwith with amendment number 1844.
I ask consent that the further reading of the motion be dispensed with.
Without objection.
I ask for the yeas and nays.
Is there sufficient second?
Here appears to be.
The yeas and nays are ordered.
I have an amendment
Emergency supplemental
instructions of the desk.
appropriations is
Clerk
what
will report.
815 is
The
about.
senator from New York, Mr. Schumer, proposes an amendment number 1845 to the instructions of the motion to refer.
I ask consent that further reading of the amendment be dispensed with.
Without objection.
I ask for the
Let's
yeas
go
and
ahead and
nays.
see if we can
Is there sufficient second?
Here appears to be.
There appears to be. The yeas and nays are ordered.
I have a second-degree amendment at the desk.
going.
The clerk will report.
The senator from New York, Mr. Schumer, proposes an amendment number 1846 to amendment number 1845.
I ask consent that further reading of the amendment be dispensed with.
Without objection.
So, Mr. President, the Senate convenes in a moment nearly 6 months in the making. A few days ago, the House of Representatives at long last approved essential national security funding for Ukraine, for Israel, for the Indo-Pacific, and for the humanitarian assistance. Today is the Senate's turn to act. For the information of senators, at 1 o'clock this afternoon, the Senate will hold 2 roll call votes related to the supplemental, one on a procedural motion and then a vote to invoke cloture. The time has come to finish the job, to help our friends abroad once and for all. I ask my colleagues to join together
is
to
about
pass the
Israel.
supplemental today as expeditiously as possible, send our friends abroad the aid they have long been waiting for. Let us not delay this. Let us not prolong this. Let us not keep our friends around the world waiting for a moment longer. I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
So now let's
Clerk
hear
will
what
call the
McConnell wants to talk about, because he
Baldwin.
comes next. There's usually a ranking order, right? The guys on top go first, and then, the guy below him, next. I could be wrong about this. It just seems to be the trend. Okay. I should have been a royal watcher. It's much easier. Less people to worry about. Congressional watcher. I'm an idiot. And we get to jump around because while we are semi-alive, we are on a delay, let's say. Like I said earlier in the broadcast, these guys snuck
I
in.
found that making and explaining sensible decisions about advancing our nation's interests is easier when you start from the right set of assumptions. Here's what I know to be true. American prosperity and security are the products of decades of American leadership. Our global interests come with global responsibilities. Healthy alliances lighten the burden of these responsibilities. And at the end of the day, the primary language of strategic competition is strength. These are the facts that led me to urge presidents of both parties not to abandon Afghanistan to terrorists, to fight efforts from both sides of the aisle to tie America's hands in critical parts of the world,
So we can
push
speed
consecutive
Mitch up
administrations to
to,
equip Ukraine
let's see what
with
that
lethal
sounds at
weapons
2x.
before Russia escalated, and to continue fighting for the sort of sustained investments in our military and defense industrial base necessary to meet the challenges that we face. The responsibilities of leadership, the value of alliances,
1.5.
the currency of hard power, These are foundational
Just needs something else.
principles. They're not driven by the fickle politics of any one moment.
Let's see if we can
They're
get some
tested and proven
open source
by
music.
the workings of a dangerous world.
I just don't want to blow you guys' ears
Today-
out. I'm sorry if that's happening.
The Senate sits for a test
That's
on
not
behalf
nice.
of the entire nation. It's a test of American resolve, our readiness, and our willingness to lead. And the stakes of failure are abundantly clear. Failure to help Ukraine stand against Russian aggression now means inviting escalation against our closest treaty allies and trading partners. It means greater risk that American forces would become involved in conflict. It means more costly deployments of our military and steeper military requirements to defend against aggression. Failure to reestablish deterrence against Iran means encouraging unchecked terrorist violence against American personnel, our ally Israel, and the international commerce that underpins our prosperity. And failure to match the pacing threat, the People's Republic of China, means jeopardizing the entire system of alliances that preserve American interests and reinforce American
There's a
leadership.
lot more going on here.
Colleagues on both sides of the aisle who dismiss the value of our allies and partners
Could be the
ignore
brink of World
what
War
history
III.
teaches
I
about
mean,
times when we lacked
a lot of
friendships.
military actions, a
our
lot of
adversaries
alliances,
understand the stakes.
a lot of money.
And they're responding with a coordinated full court press. Iran and North Korea are literally arming Russia's war in Ukraine. China is helping Iran skirt international sanctions.
See what I mean?
A, quote, friendship without limits, end quote, has blossomed between Moscow and Beijing. The authoritarians of the world may have caught the West flat-footed. They may be betting big that American influence is in decline. But increasingly, our friends understand the stakes, too. In Asia, nations with every excuse to be preoccupied by Chinese aggression understand that, in fact, defeating authoritarian conquest halfway around the world is actually in their interest. They know China will benefit from Russian advances, and they know Beijing is waiting for us to waver. In Europe, allies that had long neglected the responsibilities of collective security are making historic new investments in their own defense. Finland and Sweden, two high-tech nations, responded to Russian escalation by bringing real military capabilities to the most successful military alliance in world history. And when the House passed the supplemental last week, the Prime Minister of Sweden reiterated that our allies have even more work to do. The holiday from history is over. And in the Middle East, our close ally is locked in a fight for its right to literally exist. The people of Israel require no reminders of the stakes of hard power competition or deterrence. The only remaining question is whether America does. Do our colleagues share the view of the Japanese Prime Minister that, quote, the leadership of the United States is indispensable, end quote? Or would we rather abdicate both the responsibilities and the benefits of global leadership? Will the Senate indulge the fantasy of pulling up a drawbridge? Will we persist in the 21st century with an approach that failed in the 20th? Or will we dispense with the myth of isolationism and embrace reality? For those who insist that America cannot do what the moment requires, the facts are inconveniently clear. First, supplemental investment in the capabilities America and our friends need to defeat Russian aggression are not a distraction from China. Without the investments we've made over the past 2 years, America's defense industrial base would be even further behind the clear requirements of long-term competition with the PRC. Don't believe me? Just ask the former chairman of the House Select Committee on Chinese Communist Party, who stayed in Congress long enough to support the legislation now before us. Second, supplemental investments have expanded our capacity to produce critical munitions. This SUP contains additional investments aimed at expanding production capacity of critical munitions and weapon systems needed in the Indo-Pacific. Higher production rates and lower unit costs of critical munitions are a no-brainer for colleagues who are actually interested in strategic competition with the PRC. Colleagues on the other side of the aisle who say they're concerned over the defense industrial base today would have done well to have joined me months before Russian escalation in Ukraine in supporting a massive proposed investment under reconciliation led by our former colleagues, Senator Shelby and Senator Inhofe. If some of our Republican colleagues hadn't joined the Democratic leader in opposition, we would have begun to rebuild our capacity even sooner. And finally, investment in American hard power and leadership isn't coddling our allies. By every objective measure, it helped drive our allies to make historic investments of their own in collective defense. Across Europe, the acceleration of defense spending
I think
is outpacing our own.
I can play some
And
dramatic
right now,
music
allies and
here.
partners from Europe to the Indo-Pacific have contracted more than $100 billion
If I get proper
worth of cutting-edge
attribution.
American weapons and capabilities. That's right. Our allies across the world are buying expensive, sophisticated American weapons produced in American factories by American workers. Do my colleagues really think that will continue if America decides that global leadership is too heavy a burden? So much of the hesitation and short-sightedness that has delayed this moment is premised on sheer fiction, and I take no pleasure in rebutting misguided
I wonder if you
fantasies.
can hear that.
I wish, sincerely, that recognizing the responsibilities of American leadership was the price of admission for serious conversations about the future of our national security. Make no mistake, delay in providing Ukraine the weapons to defend itself has strained the prospects of defeating Russian aggression. Dithering and hesitation have compounded the challenges we face. Today's action is overdue.
Is it too much,
Our work does
the
not
music
end
chat?
here.
You're leaving. Is that
Trust in American resolve is not rebuilt
down to
overnight.
a 1?
Expanding and restocking the arsenal of democracy doesn't just happen by magic. And even as our allies take on a greater share
Oh, how long
of the
do I
burden of
stream?
collective security,
An hour.
our obligation to invest in our own defense is as serious as ever. So I'll continue to hold the Commander-in-Chief to account for allowing American adversaries to deter us, for hesitating in the face of escalation, and providing anything less
It
than
really
full support for
depends
allies like
how
Israel as
often
they
these
fight
guys are in session.
restore
Or
their security
committees are interesting.
and their
or
sovereignty.
what they're doing.
At the same time, I will not mince words when
I
members of
am-
my own party take the responsibilities
I have a
of
mounting
American leadership
suspicion that
lightly. Today,
we're
Senate
heading towards World War III.
faces
I mean, there's a
tests.
lot of nations
we
at
must
war.
not fail it.
A lot of alliances are being triggered.
Just that important.
What we really
Call
need
the
is
roll.
a change in leadership here in America. And in my opinion, a few judges and prosecutors need to be at least removed is the nicest thing I think you can do. Corrupt judges, corrupt prosecutors. Happens all the time in other places. And so we're in a quorum call. Let's see what happens next
Roll, please.
in this session.
The world was horrified after the Kyiv suburb of Bucha was liberated, revealing that civilians had been massacred simply for being loyal Ukrainians. But Bucha killed. Every world would like what it will only give. It will
Not
allow
interested.
for weak.
It's my stream. I do what I want.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, like my good friend from Iowa, Senator Grassley, I'm going to come down here. I want to come down to the Senate floor, talk about the National Security Supplemental we are voting on today. Commend the senior senator for Iowa. He's a great U.S. senator. That was a really good speech. I'm going to reinforce some of what he just said on the importance of this bill. But, Mr. President, importantly, the broader context of how we actually got here and where we need to be going in terms of our nation's defense. My view, the current occupant of the White House, President Biden, has gotten a free pass on his numerous, huge
Free pass
national security
for his
missteps
entire
that have been
life.
undermining our nation's security and have forced the Congress of the United States to actually take action. That's the whole point, Mr. President. We're taking action. I'm a supporter of this legislation. But we're doing it because of the failures of the current occupant of the White House. So I'm going to encourage my colleagues, particularly my Republican Senate colleagues, to vote in favor of this bill. But I think it's important to put it in a broader context of what's going on in the world. I've made a couple speeches on this before. I'm just going to reiterate some and add to some of the challenges we're facing because of the Biden administration. First, Mr. President, I think it's pretty obvious to everybody, anyone who's watching, we're in a new era of authoritarian aggression led by this dictator. That's Xi Jinping. Look at him. He gets in his camis every now and then, threatening his neighbors. By the way, China's going through the largest peacetime military buildup
Is
in the
it
history of the world.
possible that the
That doesn't
seismic
make you a little nervous about
activity
what's
in
going on in the world? It
Taiwan
should. This guy is a brutal
was
dictator. But it's
not
led by him,
natural? I'm just
Putin,
curious.
the Ayatollahs in
I'm not
Iran, the terrorists in
asserting
Iran, largest
that-
state sponsor of terrorism, the mini-me dictator, the North Korean dictator. They're all working together, Mr. President. They want to undermine our interests. They want to undermine the interest of our allies. They're driven by historical grievances. They're paranoid about their democratic neighbors. They are more than willing to invade them, as we're seeing across the world, whether Israel, whether Ukraine. And again, they're working together and they are spending boatloads of money on national security issues, military buildups. It's actually led by this guy. He's the big one that we got to keep a close eye on. So that's number one. We're in a real dangerous era. This is one thing I do agree with the Biden administration on. We've had the Secretary of Defense, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs coming in and saying, hey, we are in the most dangerous time since probably the end of World War II. Okay? Dictators are on the march. They're invading their neighbors. They're massively building up their military, and they're all working together. Sounds a little bit like the 1930s to me. The second reason, Mr. President, we need a defense industrial base supplemental is our own industrial base. Our ability to produce weapons for us, for America, has completely atrophied. I could give a speech for hours. And this, again, is part of the Biden administration's fault, but we can't build Navy ships. We can't build Navy subs. Every component of our industrial base is shrinking, it's brittle, it's atrophied, and yet we're in this dangerous period.
That's right.
So that's pretty alarming. By the way, Mr. President, it's our responsibility, Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution, the Senate, the House, to raise an army, to provide and maintain
Not
a Navy.
only
My view,
are
it's
they
the number one
trying
constitutional
to,
duty we
like-
have, securing this nation.
Not only
and
is
yet
our equipment not that
we are
great
behind. The Navy just put
anymore,
out
they're trying to
3 weeks
give,
ago
like, a
this
bunch of
alarming
it to Ukraine.
report saying the U.S. Navy is behind on
We're in
every
trouble.
ship platform that they are building 3 to 5
These
years
defense
behind.
contractors
Carrier subs.
want
Almost
us
40%
to
of our attack sub fleet
order
is
a
in
bunch of
maintenance,
new equipment.
not even out to sea. He's scared to death of U.S. subs.
Defense
What's this guy doing? He's
contractors,
cranking out
weapons
10 to 12
manufacturers.
ships,
I
high-end Navy
conflate
ships a year.
sometimes.
The Chinese
The
Communist Party's Navy is now bigger than the U.S. Navy. Danger, and our industrial base can't produce weapons the way it could. And then, Mr. President, the third reason I think we need a national security supplemental is given how weak the Biden administration has been on national security. The current budget of this president shrinks the Army, shrinks the Navy, shrinks the Marine Corps. You think Xi Jinping's impressed by that? He's not. Neither is Putin. Neither are the Ayatollahs. That's what they're doing. By the way, this president, every budget he submits to Congress for the military during these real dangerous times, what does he do? He cuts it. Cuts the military. I'm going to get more to that, Mr. President. So these are the big...
For those of you
These
who
are
aren't
the big 3 reasons that I've
watching
been
the chat,
supportive of this bill.
Smash
But here's the
says
thing,
drone
Mr.
warfare
President.
is
When you read the
is
bill,
definitely a
you look
threat.
at it,
I'm
and dig
agreeing
into the
that, yeah,
details,
new fear
it's less of a
unlocked.
foreign aid bill and much more of a bill to enhance our industrial capacity. It's not a perfect bill. I'm going to get into that in a minute. There's no such thing as a perfect bill, by the way. But almost 60% of this
Challenge
national security
accepted.
supplemental bill that we're going to be voting on goes directly into our industrial base, directly into our ability to build submarines. By the way, it unlocks $6 billion for submarines. $6 billion with the AUKUS agreement.
Yeah.
$5 billion for 150 millimeter artillery shells, over $500 million for counter UAS systems.
It's definitely
Patriots,
coming in
Javelins,
through the southern
harpoons,
border
tomahawks,
if it comes
HARM
in, right?
missiles,
Or,
TOW
you
missiles,
know,
built by
surprise,
Americans
that could surprise us.
for our
Bring
own
them to
defense.
Canada, I don't know.
That's in this bill. It's in the bill, Mr. President.
Who already has the drones?
So,
Probably Canada.
That's a really important
Buy a
component. Almost
bunch
60%
drones,
of this
no
bill
one's
goes
paying
into
attention.
that. And it has other things in it, $3 billion for our troops in the CENTCOM area of responsibility right now who are in combat, right now taking incoming missiles from the Houthis. USS Carney almost took 100 different missiles and drones. Sailors in combat. This replenishes their weapon systems, helps our troops in combat. By the way, my view, just that element alone is enough to support this bill. You got
This is
American
an
troops in combat in the Middle
interesting
East. And of course,
Congressional
this bill does
districts
go to help
benefiting
our allies and
from
partners,
Ukraine
Israel,
aid.
Taiwan.
I don't know if anybody saw
Ukraine,
this, but it
who are
was
facing
the
existential threats,
someone
literally,
was delivering a
from
list of.
their very aggressive
It
neighbors.
looked like
But again, Mr. President,
politicians
a lot
were
of this
voting
is
in
gonna stay home.
favor
We're not sending
of
subs.
the aid.
We need
It
those
just
countries.
looked
We're
like it's like,
building
okay, we
submarines
can repay these
to be
people.
ready if we
That's what
have
it
to
looked like.
in a conflict with China. Xi Jinping, that dictator I was just showing you there, he's scared to death of the nuclear sub capability of the United States. So this is mostly about us protecting our country and our industrial base to produce weapons for America. Yeah, it's going to put a lot of workers to work. But this bill primarily, if you read it, is about protecting our nation. Now, as I said, Mr. President, it's not a perfect bill. There's a number of things. I had some amendments we were debating it a couple months ago here in the Senate floor. For example, I think the direct budget support, the economic aid, that should go to our European allies to help the Ukrainians with that. That should go to the Gulf Arab allies who want to support Gaza in terms of economic aid. We should be providing the lethal aid. But I will say, Mr. President, Speaker Johnson definitely improved the bill. From what the Senate sent over a couple of months ago, I applaud him for his impressive leadership. There's a number of improvements. The direct budget support and
You don't hear
economic aid
that a
is
lot
now
these
in the form of
days.
forgivable
Johnson's
loans.
impressive leadership.
That was a President Trump idea. I think it's a good idea. The Repo Act, Senator Risch has been pushing on that hard. He's done a great job on that. That would enable us
again,
to
we
take
could
seized
fast
Russian
forward
assets and help
because we're on
to
a
use to
delay.
pay for the
And
Ukraine
as
war.
much as I respect the
It's a requirement
senator
that
from
makes the
Alaska,
budget stronger. Why are you dramatic?
wow, he's got.
And I have filed
Now believe it or
votes
not, Bernie.
with extreme right.
Sometimes people
He's very
want to hear what
dangerous
Bernie's
times.
got to
I
say.
yield the floor.
Now,
President,
am I one of
Senator
those
from
people?
Vermont.
Not always, but
the Senate will soon vote.
We need
on
more
the
viewers,
$95
chat.
billion supplemental spending package. $95 billion. That's a lot of money. especially at a time when many Americans are unable to afford their rent or pay their mortgages, pay their bills, afford health care, struggling with student debt, or many other needs. $95 billion, a lot of money. All told, this package includes tens of billions of dollars in additional military spending and major policy changes, many of which are controversial, many of which are disagreed with by the American people. Yet, unlike the House of Representatives, the Senate will not have the opportunity to hold separate votes on the various components of this bill. I have heard from many of my Democratic colleagues, and I agree, who talk about the dysfunctionality taking place in the House of Representatives. In fact, I don't know if we're quite sure who the Speaker of the House will be in a couple of weeks, or whether the extreme right wing is going to get rid of Mr. Johnson.
Bernie talking trash.
But what we can say about the House is they at least gave their members the opportunity to vote yes or no on funding for Ukraine, yes or no on aid to Israel, yes or no on TikTok, yes or no on aid to Asian countries.
Yes or no on
That is more
Mayorkas's
than can be
impeachment.
said for the U.S. Senate right now. And I remind my colleagues that this is supposedly the greatest deliberative body in the world, except we don't have very many deliberations around here. Got one bill, up or down. Mr. President, we need to have a serious debate on these issues. I think the American people want us to have a serious debate on these issues, and that is why I am trying my best to secure amendment votes, which in my view will significantly improve this bill. As it happens, I strongly support the humanitarian aid included in this bill, which will save many thousands of lives in Gaza, Sudan, Ukraine, and many other places. Strongly support it. I strongly support getting Ukraine the military aid it needs to defend itself against Putin's imperialist war. I support the Iron Dome to protect Israeli civilians from missile and drone attacks. But let me be very clear. I strongly support ending the provision which will give $8.9 billion in unfettered offensive military aid to the extremist Israeli government. A government led by Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is continuing his unprecedented assault against the Palestinian people. I also strongly oppose language in this legislation that would prohibit funding for UNRWA, the UN organization that is the backbone of the humanitarian relief operation in Gaza, and the only organization that experts say has the capability to provide the humanitarian aid that is desperately needed there. And I have filed 2 amendments to address these issues. These amendments would not touch funding for the Iron Dome and other purely defensive systems to protect Israel against incoming missiles. Mr. President, as we all know, Hamas, a terrorist organization, began this war with a horrific attack on Israel that killed 1,200 innocent men, women, and children, and took more than 230 captives, some of whom remain today in captivity. As I've said many times, Israel has and had the absolute right to defend itself against this terrorist attack. But Israel did not and does not have the right to go to war against the entire Palestinian people, which is exactly what it is doing. Mr. President, regarding offensive military aid to Israel, what we will be voting on is pretty simple. First, has Netanyahu and his government violated U.S. and international law in Gaza, which, if he has, should automatically result in the cessation of all U.S. military aid to
Schumer
Israel?
and
That is a pretty simple
McConnell
question.
and everybody who's
Second,
just
maybe even more importantly,
been there for 30
as
or
US
40 years.
taxpayers,
Come
do
on,
we
term
want to
limits.
be
It's not even
complicit
about an age thing.
in Netanyahu's
Although in Mitch
unprecedented
McConnell's
and savage military
case, it
campaign
could be.
against the Palestinian people? Do we want to
I
continue
always toy with
providing
the
the
idea
weapons
that he could be
and the
setting
military
himself
aid
up for some
that is
great
causing
defense like he
this
doesn't
massive
remember,
destruction?
truly doesn't remember. He's
Do
just
we
too
want
senile
that
for
war
something.
in Gaza
to bring him to
not
task for
just
something.
little-
But no, I don't.
US
Is it an age thing? It shouldn't be.
70% is a will
For
never
being fair, it should be a term limits
destruction
thing.
of
I'm not really interested if, you know.
Days ago and reaffirmed that Japan is already standing shoulder to shoulder with the United States. The U.S. must send the message that we are committed, that we are standing shoulder to shoulder with our allies in the Indo-Pacific. The bill that we are about to debate, discuss, and presumably vote on allows the U.S. to respond to immediate needs as China increases its military provocation of Taiwan, while also modernizing our own U.S. fleet to compete in the Pacific.
Was the
It is
earthquake
in
that was
America's,
Taiwan? Was
it is in
that?
America's vital national interest to assist Ukraine in
Probably
repelling
not.
Russian invasion, assist Israel in driving out terrorism, and assist our Indo-Pacific
You gotta
partners
wonder.
in standing up to China's threats. We must project strength. Failure to do otherwise
I mean, I agree with
undermines
that.
our credibility. And that undermining of credibility, unfortunately,
We've
resonates
done nothing
around the
but
globe.
project the
That
opposite of
credibility
strength.
was already damaged after the administration's disastrous and chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan.
4 years now.
Additionally, in this funding package, a majority of those funds provided to Ukraine and those provided in previous packages will be directly injected back into the U.S. economy. There's been a significant amount of misinformation on this bill, and it's important to clarify.
Every senator
70% of the
gets
funding
a
in the
little bit
Ukraine
of
bill,
Vivaldi in the background.
$42 billion of the $60.8 billion will be used to replenish U.S. stockpiles and develop, produce, and purchase
Supposed to
U.S.-made
be
weapons,
public
including weapons
domain
from
and
production
open
facilities
source.
in
We'll
Kansas
see
and the Kansas
when
City
YouTube
area.
processes it.
This package also requires the administration to develop a strategy to support Ukrainian victory. The American people deserve to know the objectives of supporting Ukraine, our interests as they relate to this war, the cost of not satisfying those interests, and an estimate of the resources that are needed. The supplemental will deliver on all these aspects. There is no path forward for Ukraine. There is no path forward for Israel or for Taiwan if the United States of America disengages in the world. The price tag is significant.
Ultimately, it was
But in the
getting
absence of taking a
towards-
stand now, we have to take a stand tomorrow.
So this is
Do what
all
we need to do
about.
today,
I thought
pay a
he was
price
talking
later.
about. I'm going to be talking
And later
about,
will be
shoring
more
up our own
costly.
defenses, but he's ultimately
But these
talking about
costs
giving
must be
more
shared
money
with our
to
NATO allies
Israel
and our
and
partners elsewhere in
Ukraine
the
and
world.
Taiwan. It's just
I commend NATO and
insane.
European nations that have, up to now, pledged more support to Ukraine's cause even than our own
get
country
that
has.
that's like what we
Europe
did in
has
World
pledged
War
more
II
money than
for
the
a
United
while,
States.
and we sent other
Yet,
things,
it is critical to
equipment,
rapidly
and then we
fulfill
jumped in
these commitments,
eventually. It's just,
such
it
as through the delivery of
seems.
necessary equipment like air defense system to help Ukraine better withstand Russia's onslaught. I'm reluctant, and so are many Kansans, to spend
It's
more
like,
money
they
or
know
to be engaged further in the world,
that in
especially
a
with
few
the crisis at our own
months,
southern border.
the
I share my colleagues'
store is
frustration that we were
closed or whatever,
unsuccessful.
hopefully.
We came close, but we were unsuccessful, including border policies.
All right.
to ensure America's
I wanted to give him a little
Down
air.
Chicago Avenue, west of Michigan Avenue. You go
Need
into
a
an area known as
2x
Ukrainian
speed up for
Village.
this guy, yeah?
That nomenclature speaks for itself. There are churches and gathering places, schools, families.
It's
They're
like we're
watching the war
talking-
in Ukraine
look,
with personal intensity. To them, it is a land where
We're
mothers and fathers
talking
were born,
about
where many
more
men
in
were born. They have
the
prayers and pleas to
Congress. They're
politicians
talking more
not to forget.
about other places than
You
they're
can also
talking
step right
about
outside this
America these
chamber,
days, and
a
it's
few steps away,
infuriating.
to find a group of
I
Ukrainian
don't care
Americans
what's
who have
on
been
the
demonstrating
floor.
on behalf of the cause
This
of
is
Ukraine for as long as
ridiculous.
this war has gone on.
We need to be
Saw them
talking
this
about the
morning
southern
as we
border
provide
and
typical Ukrainian
fentanyl,
Ukrainian
and they do
village
talk
public
about
meeting
that stuff,
along
but we
with
need to
Ukraine,
fix
which
it.
they reply that they agree with me.
Oh, we just
It's a great
drag
feeling to see
in
these
the
demonstrators
FBI
demonstrating
director
for a
and
cause that means so much
various
to them, and to realize that
secretaries
deciding
and
on
heads
their
of
vote today,
departments
tomorrow,
and
will make
say,
a real difference.
you know,
Whether they prevail
you
against
got to
other
go.
people,
It's
although
not
it does.
enough. We got to.
Madam President,
Something's
last
got
week,
to
my Ukrainian
change.
caucus co-chair,
What is
Senator
happening
Roger,
here?
a Republican of Mississippi, and I hosted the Ukrainian Prime Minister. You were there.
I can't.
We were joined by several colleagues from both sides of the aisle. It was some vote this week. Once they received
I can't with the Ukraine.
Bad
Can we
actors
just-
are going to be happy to step in
All right.
to fill the vacuum.
Usually Thune is
We are not.
up sooner. He's a senator from South Dakota. Where are you, sir? There he is, stepping up. Glasses are coming off, or are they? I don't know. He's so close. He's about to speak. There, yep, wiping his eyes.
Madam President.
The senator from South Dakota is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, we have a phone call.
We are not.
Thank you. Madam President, less than 2 weeks ago, Iran attacked Israel with a barrage of more than 300 missiles and drones. The attack was a notable escalation on Iran's part since the weapons were fired not just by Iranian proxies, but also directly from Iran. And it was a reminder of two things. First and foremost, the attack was a reminder of the need for the United States and the free world to make it clear to Iran that we are not going to stand idly by while Iran attacks Israel and continues to foment terror in the Middle East. Iran's malign activities have been allowed to go on for far too long. And
That
it's
was
now
the
time, not just
drone
United States, but
strike,
the nations in
right?
Europe, the Middle East, and elsewhere to call a halt to Iran's activities. On a larger scale, Madam President, Iran's attack on Israel was a reminder that bad actors and hostile powers are going to fill any space that they think they can fill. And if the United States and other free countries abdicate leadership or telegraph weakness on the global stage, bad actors are going to be happy to step in to fill the vacuum. I would not be surprised if the Biden administration's all too frequent posture of appeasement toward Iran and the lack of clarity the administration has telegraphed about U.S. support for Israel has emboldened Iran to reach further and engage in the kind of escalation that we
I'm
saw
not that
this month.
confident in the
Madam President, bad
equipment
actors
anymore
around the
around
world
here.
are flexing their power right now. Iran in the Middle East, Russia in Europe, China in the Indo-Pacific and beyond. And these powers are forging alliances with each other to advance their activities. Iran has provided Russia with weapons to use in its war on Ukraine and is working with Russia to produce drones
We've
at a
been
Russian facility.
invaded.
Meanwhile, Russia has committed
There's a
to supplying
projection,
Iran with fighter
12
jets and
million
air defense
people, not
technology,
all
assets
of them
which,
are
as a
military
recent
age
Washington
males.
Post article
There's
noted,
a
and I quote,
lot.
could help Tehran harden its defenses against any future airstrike by
And that's
Israel
not saying
or
that
the
all
United
of
States.
them
End
are
quote.
here
And
to
when it comes to China, the Secretary of State recently
for
reported, and I
nefarious
quote,
reasons,
we
but
see China sharing machine tools,
oh boy.
semiconductors, other dual-use items that have helped Russia rebuild the defense industrial base that sanctions
If you think there aren't some sleeper cells in
there.
there,
End quote.
there's some
Madam
sleeper
President, in the face
cells.
of increased
As a matter
aggression
of
from
fact,
these powers, the United States response
confirmed, I think,
needs to be one of
300
strength.
known.
And that includes not just having a strong military and a strong economy, but engaging on the global stage. As I said, bad actors will fill any space they think they can fill. And when the United States and other free countries
positions in
abdicate leadership on
government.
the global stage, bad actors will step in to fill the vacuum. The foreign aid contained in this bill is an important part of telegraphing America's refusal to cede the global stage to hostile powers. It will help demonstrate to Iran
our support for Israel will help our ally rid itself of the threat of Hamas on its border. It will help make it clear to Russia that the United States is not going to give Russia free rein in Eastern Europe. It will help make a credible investment in our own industrial base and replenish interceptors that we've used in the Red Sea. And it will let China know that while Taiwan may be small, its backing is not.
Yeah, these
Madam President,
sleeper
sending these messages is
cells.
important. It is in our nation's interest to ensure that a newly victorious and emboldened Putin isn't sitting on the doorstep of 4 NATO states whom we are bound by treaty
I don't
to
know how
protect.
to describe it in my head.
It is in our nation's interest to ensure that China, inspired by a Russian victory in Ukraine, doesn't decide that it's time to invade Taiwan. And it's in our nation's interest to ensure
This
that
is
Israel
Wikipedia.
is equipped to defend itself from Iran and its terrorist proxies. Madam President, I'm pleased that in addition to the funding for Israel, Taiwan, and Ukraine we considered before, the bill before us today
Sleeper
includes new
cells
measures.
a bunch of agents.
Notable among them is legislation to ban
or spies,
TikTok.
as my
The
understanding.
company is now purchased by an entity
I don't
unaffiliated
know.
with the Chinese Communist Party. Currently,
Tom
the Chinese
Clancy
Communist Party
is
is able
my
to gain
only
unlimited access to the
experience
information
in
of TikTok
this
users, if
area.
it so chooses. And the news that emerged last week that the Chinese embassy has actually lobbied congressional staff against legislation to force the sale of TikTok was a stunning confirmation of the value the Chinese government places on its ability to access Americans' information and shape their TikTok experience. And so I'm very pleased that the bill before us today would ban TikTok if it is not sold to a company without ties to the Chinese Communist Party. I'm also pleased that this legislation
for
includes the
what?
Rebuilding
Is
Economic
to
Prosperity
wreak
and Opportunity for
havoc,
Ukrainians Act, or the
I think,
REPO Act,
you know?
which would direct frozen Russian assets to rebuilding efforts in Ukraine. Russia has caused a horrifying amount of destruction in Ukraine, and it is right that Russian assets should go toward its rebuilding. This bill also contains additional accountability measures for our support for Ukraine, including a provision that would turn some of the funding into loans to be repaid by Ukraine when it is back on its feet. Madam President, does this bill cover everything we should be doing on the national security front, either at home or abroad? No, it doesn't. But it will provide essential support to our allies. It will not only help them preserve their freedom, but will advance U.S. interests around the globe. And so I look forward to the Senate's passing this legislation this week and sending a clear message about American resolve and about American strength. Madam President, I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Let's
Mrs. Baldwin.
see. Kickbacks, maybe? I think that's part of it.
Without objection.
Madam President, humanitarian workers deal
Let's
with
see
the
where we
humanitarian
are
crisis that we
live
have.
right now. They're still in session today.
This is $26 billion is relentlessly. We should have gotten this done shortly.
So this
After-
is
What do we
astronaut
do?
senator.
For years from China, even North Korea are helping. Madam President,
I wonder
Senator
if
Arizona
he
recognized.
is.
unanimous consent to dispense
No,
with the
I
forum
know
call.
it is.
Without objection.
Madam President, these are dangerous
Alliances
times
are-
for our national security, and the actions that we take here this week will shape the world that our kids and our grandkids grow up in. Putin continues to wage a brutal war to annex Ukraine and has been making gains as Ukraine runs low
We're at
on ammunition. Israel
1.5
is under threat
now.
from not just Iran's proxy terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, but Iran itself. Just 10 days ago, we saw them launch hundreds of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones against Israel. And China continues its aggression towards its neighbors in Asia as it renews its threats to take Taiwan by force. Our partners and allies and the democratic values we hold dear are in real danger. That should be enough to compel us to act. But it's bigger than that. Iran, China, even North Korea are helping to supply Russia's desperate war machine. China's President Xi is watching to see if we can hold together the coalition supporting Ukraine. He is judging what the cost would be if he were to invade Taiwan. Our adversaries are testing us.
So it's interesting to
They
think,
see
that
instability
invasion
and
is going to look.
dysfunction as an opportunity.
It's not going to look like.
That creates a real risk
I don't
that
think
one
they're going to
or
be
more of these
bombing
threats
things
could boil over
because
into a
they
wider
want to
conflict
preserve the
that would be much
microchip
more costly for the United
factories
States
and the
potentially
leadership there. They
put
run those
more
factories.
Americans in harm's way.
Makes you
I
think
spent yesterday
what an
at the Naval Air
invasion of
Station
the U.S. would
in
look
Patuxent
like.
River, Maryland,
Or
with U.S. Naval Academy midshipmen. They shouldn't have to go to war
Agents of
years from
chaos.
now in Europe, the Middle East, or the Pacific because of a failure of leadership in Washington, D.C. this week. That must be avoided at all costs. So, Madam President, what do? We get our allies and partners, Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, the weapons and ammunition to help them defend themselves. We modernize our own forces so our adversaries know they will lose any fight they pick with us. And we provide humanitarian support to those harmed by these conflicts, including innocent Palestinians in Gaza. The Senate is once again preparing to vote on a national security bill that will accomplish these goals and meet the dangerous moment that we find ourselves in. But let's get something straight here. We should have gotten this done shortly after the president proposed it in October. The Senate spent months negotiating before we ultimately passed it with its front.
feel like they like
At a
I get it,
volatile
but we
and
need to
dangerous
be
time in world
starting to
history.
think about our
The
own
national security
defenses.
package before us totals
How much are we
$95
going to
billion.
give to other places? It's wild.
71% of that funding, $67 billion, is defense funding, and its proxy. It includes 15 multiple hotels, 30 legislators.
Missiles fall on their cities and how much closer Putin's tanks are getting. That was clear even before I said that 2 months ago. And the path forward, the path we are finally now on,
about is whether or not that's what we want this place to be. If we think that, Mr. President, you and I, we've come together on an issue that affects both of our states, we should be allowed to offer those things up. We don't get a chance to do that. Appropriation bills. I know that the Senate appropriators have worked hard on individual bills. Chuck Schumer didn't allow those bills to be debated on the floor. Never happened. We ended up with a few minibuses. That would be a great reform. And how about, instead of every hour, maybe you show up, or what if we sat in our seats and actually voted on this stuff for 4 or 5 hours? We could get through a lot, but the senator from New York is allergic to work unless he can control the outcome. Or say, if you object now, everyone has to, they change their plans last minute.
You suggested
or
a
if you don't
drone
support
kind
this
of
without an opportunity
attack
to
on
affect it,
American
you're against chemical
soil
poison.
isn't so
You want to shut down the government.
unimaginable.
Or you're for Putin.
I don't
these
think we're going to be
ridiculous things that get
boots on the
thrown out
ground invaded, that's for sure.
Open it up. And I'll tell you why it won't
Famous
happen, because
last
it's a real
words,
threat.
right?
It's a threat to him. Because the idea that other senators
Would Putin
who aren't part
invade
of,
Alaska?
the two that get to make all the calls, that we would find a different way.
Probably not, right?
That's a threat to his power. Because right now he gets to say, come to me with everything, I'll put it in some omnibus, there won't be any time to debate it, they probably won't be able to
Would
read it, but if they
Trudeau.
don't go for it, you want to shut down the government.
No, I know he would.
So,
no, right.
to all the senators, I would like to work with you to dislodge this concentration of power that no doubt our founders would be rolling in their graves over. This diffusion of power that's defined by our separation of powers, and federalism was meant to spread it out to protect individual liberty.
That's
It certainly
assuming
was never
it's
intended
not
for one
already
person in the
happening.
Senate who
There's
can
a
always
lot
be
of
recognized, and like last
plans
week did something that had
blow
never
up.
happened in the history
I
of our
don't
republic,
remember
which was to
that
dismiss articles of
happening.
impeachment, even though we're
Trains
supposed to have a
derailing.
trial.
I don't remember those news
Now,
reports.
granted, he had accomplices in that. Every single Democrat
You know,
was with him.
especially
He's recognized
when there's a
first.
Netflix show or a movie about
feel
it the
the
week
tree.
before, it's kind of weird.
There are no amendments.
Okay?
We have to
I don't
beg
remember ships
to be heard,
smashing into
which is why I
bridges.
objected to that farce last
It's
week.
just
I
not
don't think
something
it's
that
becoming of United States
I
senators.
was paying attention
Thank you,
to.
Senator Schumer, for giving me
Maybe it's
2 minutes
probably
to speak.
me.
Anyway, there's a better way. It's playing out again here today because we are essentially taking what the House gives us. The upper chamber is capitulating to the House to say we can't actually affect this thing. We can't change anything. And if you do it, pick the poison. You're threatening the security of another country or something ridiculous. So with that, Mr. President, I would just hope that this is a clarion call for
where do you
reform.
think it's gonna
The
be?
Senate is broken.
Assuming there's a 9/11.
Mr. President,
You know, Los Angeles
Mr. President,
and
I
New
echo and
York
endorse
are
the
already
wise
in
comments
shambles.
by
You
my
don't
friend and colleague, the distinguished
see
senator
the-
from Missouri.
yeah.
What we're
Blow on
witnessing
it,
here
it
is the
falls
destruction
over.
of
Mike
the
Lee.
legislative process in the Senate. The Senate's here
We
today
like Mike
preparing
Lee
to
on this
vote on one of
channel.
the most significant pieces of legislation this entire Congress. That is on a bill to send nearly $100 billion overseas, and senators are unable even to offer an amendment to that bill. By filling the amendment tree this afternoon, the majority leader has prevented every single member of this body from offering amendments to the legislation, any efforts to improve it. If we want to have any amendment considered, we have to beg the majority leader to let it come before the full Senate for a vote. Now, you may remember that just a couple of months ago, we were in a very similar position on a very, very similar bill. Senator Schumer promised a fair and open amendment process on the National Security Supplemental in February of this year. But not one amendment, not a single amendment, was considered on the Senate floor. Republicans filed over 150 proposed amendments to improve the bill, but not one vote on a single one of those amendments or any other was allowed. Why? Why? Well, Senator Schumer blocked every amendment from even being considered by filling the amendment tree. That blocked all of the other 99 senators from participating meaningfully in that process. Now, why wouldn't
We
he want
don't like
amendments?
Schumer on this
That is,
channel.
after all, the hallmark characteristic of what defines us as a body. It's why we call ourselves the world's greatest deliberative legislative body. So why wouldn't he want those? Well, I think it has a lot to do with the
Ships is
fact that
interesting.
an amendment might point to some of the weaknesses in the bill, some of the defects of the bill. It might prompt members to, I don't know, slow down and ask whether this is a prudent idea to send a lot of humanitarian aid to Gaza, up to $9.5 billion of it that could go there, with minimal guardrails, where Hamas will with certainty seize it to wage war against
So
Israel.
when they're
Or
doing
if the
these
US
drone
taxpayers
strikes
footing the bill
overseas and
for,
abroad, what are
quote-unquote,
they?
gender
What's the
advisors in Ukraine's
mechanism? Are
military.
they on the
Should
remote
we
control,
really
or are they
vote for a bill that does
programmed
this?
like the
That's what an amendment
destination already
forces
into the
all of
drone?
us
What do you?
to ask
How does
ourselves
this
and
go
decide
down?
on one particular question or
Is there
another.
like one
But
guy? Is
leadership
there
in the Senate wants to
100
avoid these thorny
guys
questions that might
flying
block the vote.
drones individually?
Leadership wants to ram this bill through the Senate with minimal debate.
I wonder.
And perhaps no amendments, because
I guess
they
they could do
know
it any which
that
way they
aspects of
want.
it, especially the $60 billion for Ukraine, are massively controversial with the American people, those who elected us, those who pay taxes, to fund these efforts. Now, my colleagues and I are working in good faith to reach a unanimous consent agreement to bring forward a handful of amendments and set up a standalone vote in exchange for expediting the passage of the bill. We nearly had that agreement locked in late Friday night. An agreement to vote on just 2 amendments and 1 standalone bill. But a couple of senators on the other side of the aisle panicked and started objecting to any and all agreements. They panicked because they knew that one of those items set up as part of the UC, the standalone legislation, to redesignate the Houthis as a foreign terrorist organization, this amendment offered up by my friend and colleague, the senator from Texas, might actually pass. Remember, this is the same entity that's been firing on U.S. forces in the region and those of our allies, and yet they couldn't let that happen. Democrats will agree only to amendments that they find politically palatable or no, will not pass. Now, it's not always been this way in the Senate.
It's terrifying.
When I first joined this
All
body in
those
2011 as a new member,
different types of
individual members could call
drones.
up our amendments freely and then make them pending. And
Should have seen it
the Senate
coming.
would then have to
I
dispose
don't think
of
I
them, as
did.
it does with
I
pending
guess.
amendments. Either by voting them
we
in,
used them
voting
for
them out,
years, right?
up or down, or by
Just
almost to the
seem,
table, or reject
but
them.
using them
members
isn't the
had to
same
vote.
as them being used.
They had to take ownership for their opinions
I don't
in
know,
public.
it's
They had to
wild.
let their constituents
Totally different
know where they stood.
perspective.
Today, the majority leader hides the ball from
I was
the
never
public
a
by filling
big
the
let's
amendment
drone
tree, ensuring that the
strike
amendments that he and his party dislike will never see the light of day. This is a circus.
I never really
It's a madhouse. Filling
contemplated
the amendment
it,
tree isn't
but I
about
have heard
creating
that
an
the
orderly
people that
process.
operate
It's
them
about
have
limiting
terrible
debate.
PTSD.
When we had an open process, when members could call up their amendments and make them pending on most bills, it actually sped up consideration.
I guess that's a
of bill.
generalization.
Members knew that they'd have a fair shot in the debate eventually, so they'd be more cooperative. They'd be more willing to collapse time, wait until the next bill to offer their amendment, or take a motion to table as a proxy for their
Smash,
amendment
we're
vote. But in
definitely
today's
getting
Senate, we do
flagged.
nothing on the floor for hours, while members and staff hide in the cloakroom and argue about what we can and cannot vote for. They twist arms, pressure members in private, and make assurances they can that don't intend to keep, saying that, oh, you'll get the amendment in the base text of the next bill, or you'll get it as a freestanding measure another time, and then they shrug their shoulders.
What movie
when
was
It
that?
just doesn't work out.
What movie?
Why not have these debates in public? Why not allow our senators and their constituents to know what's going on? Well, it's because the majority leader doesn't
I
want
didn't
to
see
give up
that
control.
movie.
Sadly,
Interesting.
while the
Or maybe I
Democrats
did.
pioneered this change in the amendment process, Republican leadership chose to tolerate the practice and even continue it while we were in the majority by filling the amendment tree so that no one could offer an amendment without the leadership's blessing. For both sides, it is about control. It's about protecting members from voting, the very thing we all came to this body to do. On the Republican side of the aisle, our aspiring leaders need to ask if they want to perpetuate this awful trend. Will they tolerate blocking out members,
Of course they're going to
including members of their own
perpetuate the
party,
awful trend.
from offering amendments? Will they continue to lock down the floor? Will they continue to
Oh,
disenfranchise
that's
members,
their-
and more importantly, those they represent, by preemptively
They're so
blocking them
happy to
from
use-
exercising
I
their
mean,
procedural
both
rights?
sides use
Or
these
will they
methods,
finally
though,
stop this
right?
barbaric practice of filling
All
funding
right,
for the
Mike.
Iron Dome or other purely defensive systems, but it would end aid to a war machine which has already killed
Great.
34,000 Palestinians and wounded 77,000, 70% of whom are women and children. And right now, as we speak, hundreds of thousands of children face starvation as a result of that war machine. Poll after poll shows that the American people are sick and tired of seeing their taxpayer dollars support the slaughter of innocent civilians and the starvation.
Considerations. If you
Use the
support a fair and
money here.
open
That's our only point. We would like for money to be spent in America cleaning up the messes that have been made by, Bernie, Schumer, and McConnell over the past 40 years. Oh, look at them all chumming it up. I think that's where we are at. I don't know if there's any more speakers to scrutinize and make fun of. Just kidding. Just kidding. Most of them are very good. That's why they're there. We are live on the Senate floor. Angel Has Fallen. Or that's the movie. I gotta see it. Stuff like that already exists using AI. But I think on a bigger
Vance.
scale. That's
No.
yeah.
Ms. Hassanai.
Absolutely terrifying. But if you're just joining us, we are live on the U.S. Senate floor. Smash that like button. That's the 3 dots in the corner. Not the best setup here in the vertical feed. But hey, I appreciate anybody that can. Maybe I'll smash some of these little icons here and bring some people in. Non-stop smash.
On this vote, the yeas are 80, the nays are 19. 3/5 of the senators duly chosen and sworn having voted in the affirmative, the motion is agreed to. Cloture having been invoked, the motion to reaffirm and the amendments pending thereto fall.
Mr. President.
The majority leader.
Could we have some order, please, Mr. President?
Members will take their conversations outside.
Mr. President, today, the Senate sends a unified
What happened?
message to the entire world. America will always defend democracy in its hour of need. We tell our allies we will stand with you.
How much money are we sending them?
We tell our adversaries, don't mess with us. We tell the world, we will do everything to defend democracy and our way of life. In a resounding bipartisan...
Oh, man. See, this is what happens when you go live. I think if we just
vote,
maybe refresh
the
it,
relentless
we'll
work
be a
of
little better off here. Hold on.
Today, the Senate sends
And now
a
we're not live
unified
again.
message
We were more
to the
live
entire world.
a minute ago than
America
we are
will
right now.
always defend democracy.
But it says
in
it's
its hour
live.
of need.
It's the government
We
lying.
tell our
It's not me.
allies, we will stand with you.
I own
We
it.
tell our adversaries, don't mess with us. We tell the world, we will do everything to defend democracy and our way of life.
Anvil.
In a resounding
Angel has fallen.
bipartisan
Let me see
vote,
this.
the relentless work of 6 long months has paid off. Congress is sending the supplemental to President Biden's desk. Getting this done
I saw all
was one of the greatest achievements the Senate has faced in years, perhaps decades. A lot of people inside and outside the Congress wanted this package
What
to
other
fail.
ones have there been in this
But
like
today,
has
those in
fallen
Congress
series? I know at least
who
saw
stand on
one.
the side of democracy are winning the day. To our friends in Ukraine, to our allies in NATO, to our allies in Israel, and to civilians around the world in need of help, help is on the way. To our friends in Ukraine, America will deliver more ammo and air defenses and basic supplies that you need to resist Putin on the battlefield. To our friends in Israel, America will soon deliver aid to
London
help you
has
fight
fallen,
the scourge of
Olympus
Hamas and
has
stand
fallen.
up to Iran. To
And
innocent
Angel, I
civilians
did
in the
not
midst
know
of the
about
war,
Angel has
in the
fallen.
midst
Thank
of
you
war,
for that smash.
from Gaza to Sudan,
I'm gonna check
America
that
will
one out.
deliver food and medicine
one
and
out.
clothing. And to our friends in the Indo-Pacific, we will stand with you to resist the Chinese Communist Party. And to the whole world,
We'll literally stand with
no
everybody until we
mistake.
can't stand anymore.
America will deliver on its promise to act like a leader on the world stage, to hold the line against autocratic thugs like Vladimir Putin. A few months ago, Putin made a bet that American aid would sooner or later come to an end. We are showing Putin that betting against America is always, always a grave mistake. Over the past few months, I've spoken repeatedly and at length about the supreme importance of getting this supplemental package done. Starting in October and through Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's and into the spring, I said again and again that we had to work in a bipartisan way, Democrats and Republicans alike, if we wanted to pass this bill. And when we succeeded in getting the supplemental through the Senate the first time in February, it was for
God, my
two
kids are going
reasons
crazy
above all:
upstairs. Sorry, Chuck.
persistence and bipartisanship. At certain points, it might have seemed hard to see how we'd reach our goal, but we never lost hope that if we persisted, we could finish the job. Today, thank God, our persistence has been validated. The bill the Senate sent to us by the House is largely the same as the bill in substance as what the Senate has championed all along. It wasn't easy to reach this point, but today's outcome yet confirms another thing we've stressed from the beginning of this Congress. In divided government, the only way to ever get things done is bipartisanship. I'm very pleased that in this moment, when it mattered most, both parties found a way to work together, even when it wasn't easy. Again, persistence and bipartisanship is what saved the day. Leader McConnell and I, who don't always agree, worked hand in hand and shoulder to shoulder to get this bill done.
These guys have been
Together,
working
we were
together for the
bipartisan
past
and
30
persistent.
years, and they don't always agree,
Now
but
it's
they have
troubling
been working
that a very
with
small minority within the
dark
hard right
forces to stay
tried
in power.
desperately for months
They
to
just
prevent
keep
Congress
renewing the
from
dark
doing the right
forces
thing.
budget. Oh, my God.
These
these
isolationists
guys
have now
make me
secured
cringe.
their ignominious place in history as the ones who'd see America stick its head in the sand as our enemies sought to undermine us. Had they won, they would have presided over a declining America. I'm glad that today we will see that effort fail. This is an inflection point in
Didn't mean to
history.
do that.
Western democracy perhaps faced its greatest test since the end of the Cold War. The conflicts we see right now in Europe, in the Middle East, and the tensions of the Indo-Pacific will go a long way in shaping the balance of power between democracy and autocracy in the decades to come, and the consequences for America's long-term security will be profound. If Putin's allowed to seize the territory of a neighboring sovereign nation, if China's Communist Party is allowed to consume the Indo-Pacific, if Iran is allowed to dominate the Middle East, and if America were to stand by and do nothing, it is the United States that would suffer the consequences most of all in the long run. Failure to act now could not only undermine the legitimacy of our democratic values, it would have impacts across American life. It would hurt us politically, economically, militarily, and socially. It would harm the competitiveness of U.S. businesses, endanger the safety of our troops, cripple America's innovative potential, and make the world a more hostile place for our civic values, individual liberty, freedom of expression, equal justice under law, and opportunity for all. We always try to live up to these ideals, but they will not survive if autocratic powers like Putin and the Chinese Communist Party overtake America in this century. That's what's at stake in the war in Ukraine, where we face Putin. That's what's at stake in the war in Indochina. That's what's at stake in Indochina, where we face Xi. That's what's at stake in conflicts in the Middle East, where we face Iran. Nothing less than the future of American security and the future of the democratic order that has survived since the end of the Second World War. So, we have a choice. We can either make a down payment on defending our security or finding ourselves on the back foot, facing much graver threats in years and decades to come. The only answer is the right one. We must act now. We have learned in recent years that democracy is a fragile and precious thing. It will not survive the threats of this century, the new threats, if we aren't willing to do what it takes to defend it. And if America will not lead the way to project democracy in this age,
democracy is not going to
other
survive
nation
Senator Schumer. It's just
that is the burden. That is the duty
Oh.
of a nation as great as ours.
Sir, you've killed
There are
democracy.
so many people on both sides
Just
of the
like
aisle
his niece tried to kill
who
comedy.
deserve
She
credit
tried.
for this immense accomplishment. I thank President Biden for
just
his
when you think he's
stalwart
done.
leadership. He never flinched or winced.
His
he knew how important
stalwart
this was
leadership.
and was always working with
Doesn't
us
know
and
what day of the week
importuning
it
us
is.
to move forward. I thank Leader McConnell, as I've mentioned before, working hand in hand with us, not letting partisanship get in the way. I thank Speaker Johnson, who rose to the occasion. In his own words, said he had to do the
very
right thing
weird
despite the
move
enormous
on his
political
part.
pressure on him. And I thank
Very
Leader
weird
Jeffries,
move. He
who
kinda
worked so well
said
together
not
in
another
his
bill.
bipartisan way with Speaker Johnson. And let me say this once again about my friend, the Republican leader.
They must
We were
have
of
some
one
dirt
mind
on him.
to get this bill done. It was our bipartisanship, our linking of arms
Man,
together
just when you think Schumer's
that
wrapping
got
up.
this large and difficult bill through the Congress, despite many political ideologues who wanted to bring it down. Bipartisanship once again prevailed, and I thank him for his leadership. I want to thank my Senate colleagues, particularly in my caucus. The dedication and unity and strength that you have shown has made this possible. I was able, as leader, to work
This guy just can't.
with the Republican
Thanks,
leader
this
in
is
the
why
House,
he's a great
the Speaker,
politician.
the
Thanks.
minority leader in the House, and the
Thanks,
President,
everybody.
because I knew I had our full caucus behind us, strongly, fervently. The speeches that we heard at our Tuesday lunches, made by many who are sitting here, would make every American proud. And I thank you, thank you, thank you for that. For the past 6 months, our friends and allies across the world have been watching what's been going on in Congress and asking themselves the same thing. Will America stand by her friends
Will
to
Chuck
face down
Schumer
the
stop
forces
talking?
of autocracy? Will
It's 3
America
o'clock,
follow
chat.
through
I
on
do
its
have to
commitment be a
run.
leader
That's
on the
been
world
about an
stage
hour.
and
It's been less than an hour, but the kids
safeguard
got to
the
go to
cause of
jiu-jitsu.
democracy? Will America
So
summon
with
the
that in
strength
mind,
to come
remember,
together,
knowledge is power.
overcome the
Subscribe for
centrifugal
more.
pull of
But also,
partisanship, and rise once again to meet
it's
the
it's
magnitude
really.
of the moment? Today,
I think we got to turn up.
Both parties
turn out in November.
working together, the Senate answers these questions with a thunderous and resounding yes. I yield the floor.
Oh boy. All right. So, good place to end it as any. Thank you for joining me. And as I said, knowledge is power. Subscribe for more. Thank you, Smash. Very good conversation that may have the feds joining us sooner than we'd like. Yeah. But I'll check that movie out. All right. Talk to y'all later.